Gain-of-function research, a hotly debated type of research within the medical community in which scientists make viruses deadlier with the intent of preventing pandemics, is at the heart of the lab leak theory.
Staff writer at Vox's Future Perfect, Kelsey does a deep dive on virus hunting and the debate surrounding it. She joins us now to expand on her reporting. Welcome.
Hey.
I read your story. I thought it was great. Tell us more about it, particularly. So it's not just, the manipulation of viruses, which I think now people are much more wary of, but even the act of seeking them out, of trying to, discover these viruses, in the wild, in caves, in places where they are. There are aspects of the scientific community saying this is, valuable, necessary research, and in your piece, you give voice to the other side of that, which is, isn't that maybe a really good way of spreading these viruses, is going out and seeking them in the wild?
Yeah, so gain-of-function research I've opposed for a very long time. Like before the pandemic, I was writing, we should not be risking everybody's lives with this. But I used to be much more in favor of the sort of viral discovery research. You go out into a cave, you sample bats, you try and find viruses. And recently, some researchers, especially Kevin Esvelt at MIT, who is one of the pioneers of CRISPR, has been making the case that actually many of the concerns that we have about gain-of-function research, we should have also about trying to identify viruses with pandemic potential. Because a lot of the problems here are, if we have a virus that could kill millions of people if unleashed, are we taking adequate precautions against accidental use? Are we taking adequate precautions against military use by some nation that decides to build bioweapons? Are we taking adequate precautions against terrorist groups trying to build it themselves? And all of those questions you might ask about gain-of-function research, you should also ask about anything that's that deadly. Just because it's occurred in nature doesn't mean it's any more of a good idea to have on hand in our labs.
It's kind of an interesting concept, right? I see your point now that you're bringing it up, and I hadn't really thought about it myself, about the virus hunting aspect. Of course, many of us are against the gain of function. We're kind of like, oh, okay, that's maybe not a good idea. But actually going and seeking in the wild these viruses, I suppose that, they're going into places where humans would normally not go. Is that right? So these are, bats and humans would not naturally be interacting in any way. There's a reason why the species are separated. One's nocturnal, one isn't. One's hiding in a cave, one isn't, right? And then when you go and you insert yourself into a place where you don't belong, you might discover something that then unleashes onto humankind something very dangerous. Is that what you're kind of leading at with it? Why it's dangerous?
Yeah. Exactly. There are some things maybe it's better to leave buried. And the researchers I talked to were much more supportive of work at the actual human-wildlife interface, like sampling for viruses in human populations that are in frequent contact with animals, seeing if anything is crossed over. That's not the problem. The question is sort of, looking for trouble, going out to a cave that, we could just leave alone, sampling for viruses that, that maybe there's some small probability they would cross over into humans on their own. But we're raising that probability a lot if we handle the bats, take a bunch of samples, take the samples back to a lab, infect other animals in order to test transmission and stuff like that, publish sequences online. All of those are decisions that should be made thoughtfully and have sort of been done by default.
And it's kind of like, well, what's the upside of doing that, right? The implicit kind of rationale here is, well, we need to do this in order to be prepared for the next pandemic. But of course, doing this raises the risk of a future pandemic. But then if the trade-off is that we are better prepared, I guess you could make that case. But right, none of the vaccines we've developed, the therapeutics we've developed, these are not things that we're getting based on the research we've done on gain of function or hunting these viruses. Like, none of it has to do with that. So what was the benefit of this kind of research? What do they claim?
Yeah, so that is a question that a lot of people are sort of asking. All right, we knew that coronaviruses might be a problem. We went out and we sampled tons of coronaviruses, and then a coronavirus pandemic hit. Did all of that coronavirus research actually help us develop vaccines, develop therapeutics, develop tests, respond? Most of the people I talked to said no, it didn't.
That's amazing. That's really amazing.
Yeah, all of that work was not what helped us invent vaccines. There are some people who are like, well, it helped a little bit. It helped us understand the fundamentals. It's hard to say that any scientific research is worthless. But for the most part, like, no, we didn't use it to make the vaccines. We didn't use it to develop the therapeutics. We used previous research on SARS, which is a coronavirus that had actually infected humans. But this cataloging work, not so much. And of course, there is
isn't
the
that interesting?
that this cataloging work caused the pandemic.
Right.
So,
right. Even worse. Even worse.
Right. It's like in the positive column, right? Some scientists had some fun doing some research, and then maybe it caused all this widespread death. It's wild.
Right.
It's wild.
Interesting.
Yeah. So is there discussion in the scientific community about serious discussion about limiting these kinds of practices going forward? Because based on what you hear a lot of soft institutional defense of the idea that scientists should have a free hand to do this kind of thing if they think it's in the best interest, that kind of funding should continue, government funding should continue. I'm not seeing a lot of grappling with or reckoning with with the serious concern a lot of people have that this just is not worth it.
Yeah, I think it's very much going to be specific to each agency and each situation, which is a little bit of a frustrating place to be in. It would be cool to see like a nationwide sort of public discussion over what standards the government should have for funding research and whether we're meeting them. But like, for example, Deep Vision, which is the viral sampling program, is USAID. And NIH has whatever stance they have on gain of function. USAID is sort of doing their own thing and having different conversations. So I think it's very much plausible for some of these agencies to redirect some of the money they're spending towards more valuable and less risky work. And across the board, less likely. But, eventually I think people's questions are pretty legitimate and they're going to end up having to be answered.
Hopefully we get some of those answers at some point, especially whether or not this virus hunting and experimenting with them in the lab is what actually caused this massive pandemic. That would be an epic scandal, right? So that's why everybody's kind of shying away from it, saying, "No, it wasn't us. It wasn't us. This just came from a bat soup."
But they don't. Yeah.
Kelsey, thank you.
Yeah. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks so much. Absolutely. Have a great day.
We'll be back with more Rising right after this.